I knew something was wrong the second Vincent called me into the living room. He never raised his voice. Never even used my name unless it was to pass the salt or ask who parked behind him. But this time? He said, "Can you come here a sec?" And his tone wasn't casual, it was final. Everyone was already there. Maribel sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, her fingers tangled in her lap like she'd rehearsed this moment but still wasn't ready. My mother-in-law stared at the window blinds like they held answers she didn't want to say out loud. It was too quiet for a house full of family. I walked in and felt like I'd stepped into a courtroom, not my own home. Vincent stood in the middle of the room, hands clasped behind his back like some kind of manager giving bad news. "This house fits my 15 relatives," he said, like he was announcing the weather. "You need to move out by tomorrow." That sentence didn't make sense at first. It landed like a feather, not a blow. I blinked, looked around, waited for someone to laugh or correct him. But no one moved. No one said a word. I was still trying to process what he meant when it hit me like a cold slap. He was serious. He wasn't warning. He was instructing. For a second, I remembered the day we closed on this house. I was the one who found it. I was the one who wrote the first check. It was supposed to be ours. Shared. A start over for everyone. They say home is where the heart is, I thought. Today, mine flatlined. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. But something inside me shifted like a door slamming shut. I waited for someone, anyone, to speak up. Maribel glanced at me, then looked away. My own sister, sitting silent while her husband bulldozed me. My mother-in-law sighed but didn't meet my eyes. I stood in the middle of the room like a stranger. Not a tenant. Not family. Just an inconvenience. Vincent kept talking like it was a done deal. "My family's coming in from Arizona, Texas, Chicago, 15 of them. We need space. You'll understand." I cut in. "You knew I lived here. What about my lease?" He smirked, like it amused him. "You didn't sign anything. Remember?" That's when the fire lit. Not in my throat, but somewhere deeper. Not tears, strategy. I wasn't going to beg for space I already earned. My father used to say, "Silence is the voice of the planning mind." I bit my tongue and nodded slightly. This wasn't new. It had been planned. They knew. All of them. And I was the last to be told because they knew I wouldn't go down without a fight. 5 years ago, when Vincent's business was tanking and Maribel's hours were cut, I stepped in. I covered the down payment, 40% of it. My credit got us the loan. They said leaving my name off the title would keep things simple. Family, right? I believed them. This house was never supposed to be permanent. It was a stepping stone. A place for all of us to rebuild. I did the cooking. Paid utilities. Took care of maintenance. And now I was being erased from it all with a 24-hour eviction notice and no legal ground to stand on. They turned my generosity into a contract of silence. I tried to speak again. "Vincent, you can't just." He cut me off, loud and sharp. "You've always had a problem with boundaries." Maribel stepped in, not to defend me, but to smooth things over. "Let's not make this bigger than it is." That stung more than Vincent's words. She'd known. Weeks of her acting nervous, checking over her shoulder, brushing off my questions, it all made sense now. I turned to our mother-in-law. "Do you think this is fair?" She didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. It's just how things worked out. I gripped the armrest of the couch so tightly my knuckles turned white. My voice stayed calm, but inside, a storm raged. If no one will remember who I was in this house, I told myself, I'll make sure they never forget who I become. I stood slowly. No drama. No slam of the door. Just movement. Quiet, deliberate. 24 hours? I asked. Vincent nodded, arms crossed like he just won something. Okay, I said. Then I better get started. I walked out of that living room, past each face, eyes dry, heart on fire. They thought they saw a woman defeated. But I wasn't packing my suitcase. I was loading my arsenal. They gave me 24 hours, I'm giving them a lifetime to regret it. I walked into my room and locked the door for the first time in almost 6 years. It didn't need a lock before. This was the one place that had always been mine, where I could breathe without explanation. But now, it felt like I was trespassing in my own life. The room was still. I sat down on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, hands resting on my knees. I didn't cry. I wasn't going to give them that. I reached under the bed and pulled out 2 boxes I never got around to tossing after I moved in. Maybe I always knew I'd need them again. I started folding clothes. Not rushing. Just steady, one drawer at a time. I labeled things not by type, but by meaning: work, winter, don't miss, still hurts. My mind replayed the afternoon like a slow reel: Vincent's face, the silence, Maribel looking away. I wasn't trying to feel it again. I just wanted to understand. Each item brought up a different memory. The sweater I wore to my first job interview here. A chipped mug I bought from a flea market with Maribel before she met him. A pair of socks that weren't mine but ended up in my drawer 2 years ago. I left them there. Like so many things, I never got back. I chose not to pack anything that wasn't originally mine. They'd probably watch for that. I didn't want them to accuse me of stealing what I'd already given too much of. You don't pack anger into boxes, I thought. You fold it. Quietly. At the bottom of a drawer, I found an old recipe book. Worn, stained, filled with notes in the margins, mine. Every Sunday dinner came from that book. But I never once heard them say Eloin's lasagna or her chili. It was always just dinner. I slid a folded note inside, addressed to no one. It wasn't a goodbye letter for them. It was for me. For the girl who bit her tongue so many times she forgot the taste of truth. They said I was too soft. Maybe. But it's the soft earth that grows the strongest roots. I left the book on the kitchen counter when I went down for a glass of water. Next to it, I placed a framed family photo from 5 years ago, our first holiday here. I turned it face down. Let them decide if they want to look. Let them look at it and wonder what changed, I thought. They'll never admit it was them. Back in my room, I zipped the second suitcase closed. It was just past 10. No knock on the door. No footsteps in the hall. I lifted one bag, then the other. My hands didn't shake. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Even the refrigerator hum felt like it was holding its breath. I passed the living room. Maribel was on the couch, eyes shut, but I knew she was awake. She didn't move. I heard music from the garage, Vincent. No words. No apologies. Not even a fake one. I opened the front door slowly. Didn't slam it. Didn't look back. Across the street, Mrs. Dupree was watering her plants, still wearing her apron. She saw me dragging my bags down the steps. Her eyes followed me like she already knew. "You walk like you're done explaining," she said, voice soft. I paused. "Because I am." The Corolla started on the second try. I sat there for a moment, engine running, fingers still on the steering wheel. The porch light behind me flickered once, then held. No one came out. I drove with no music. Just the road and the sound of my own breathing. I didn't want to stay in the city. Too many memories waiting behind every traffic light. I headed north, out toward the edge of nowhere. About 25 minutes later, I pulled into a small roadside motel, the kind with numbers peeling off the doors and vending machines that still took quarters. I'd stayed here once on a road trip, years back. It was forgettable. That's why I chose it. I checked in under my middle name, June. For the first time, it didn't feel like hiding. It felt like starting. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and dust. I cracked the window. Cold air rushed in, but I didn't close it. They think they put me out, I thought. But they just released me. I plugged in my phone, letting it sit on the bedside table while I kicked off my shoes. My back ached, but not from lifting. From carrying the weight of silence for too long. The screen lit up. A message. Unknown number, I heard what they did. "You need to see this. Call me." I froze. The name attached to the number made my stomach drop, Cassie. A cousin I hadn't spoken to since her family moved to Chicago. The message blinked again. I hadn't even unpacked, and already, the past was knocking. The motel room was quiet, too quiet. That kind of silence doesn't settle you, it presses down. Morning light crept in from the crack between the curtains, but I stayed in bed a while, facing the wall, waiting for my thoughts to stop racing. They didn't. The cold air from the open window had stiffened the blankets. I sat up, rubbed the sleep from my eyes, and reached for my phone. 3 missed calls. All from Janae. Her name on the screen was like hearing an old song you forgot you knew. I hadn't talked to her since her family moved to Chicago. She didn't say goodbye back then, and I didn't chase after a cousin who disappeared so easily. But now she was calling 3 times in one night. I hit play on her voicemail. Her voice cracked at the start. "Eloan, I know why they did this to you. But it's worse than you think. Way worse. That did it. I didn't pace. I didn't throw anything. I just sat very still for a moment, my heart thumping in that slow, sinking way when something awful makes too much sense too quickly. Then I opened my phone's recorder app. I didn't trust anyone anymore. Not after the last time I was caught off guard by someone I thought was on my side. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice was hushed. "I can't talk long," Janae said. "But you need to hear this. Go. There are cameras in that house. Not the security kind, hidden ones. Aunt Clarice had them put in 2 years ago. Said it was for safety, after that break-in scare." I blinked. What? I didn't think anything of it until Vincent started showing people clips of you. Edited ones. You folding laundry while muttering. You walking around late at night, barefoot. Said you were off. My jaw tightened. That flashing red light I saw last winter behind the bookshelf. I thought it was a router. People started calling you unstable. They said you were unpredictable. That's why no one stood up for you. They think you're broken. I stared at the motel wall. I wasn't broken. I was blindsided. I'm sorry, Elle, she whispered. I should have told you sooner. I took a breath. They were rewriting history with my silence. And making sure no one asked questions. Janae hesitated, then dropped another truth. Vincent told folks you owed him money. Said you skipped out on utilities, repairs that you stuck them with over $8,000 in bills. I laughed, a short bitter sound. What? Mom asked for proof. He sent copies of old statements, but none were in your name. Some weren't even from the time you lived there. My hands clenched the edge of the blanket. He's framing me. I think he's building a narrative. So if you ever tried to fight back, it'd look like you were running from guilt. It wasn't just an eviction anymore. This was sabotage. Character assassination. They didn't evict me, I said slowly. They erased me. Janae's voice cracked. I'm sorry, Eloan. I really am. But I thought you should know. You were right to call. Silence stretched between us before I added, one day, when this is over, we'll talk in the sunlight. Not like this. I ended the call and sat with the stillness. Around 11, I left the motel. The sun was too bright for how I felt, but I needed air. I drove to an old diner on the edge of town. I used to stop there after late shifts, coffee always burnt, waitresses always kind. She spotted me the moment I walked in. Well, if it ain't the quiet one, the waitress grinned. Rough night? I smiled back. Tight. You could say that. I slid into a booth near the window, ordered coffee, and pulled out my laptop. I didn't know yet what I'd do with any of it, but I needed to see it on paper. I began building a timeline, house bought, money loaned, who lived there when, what conversations happened, what was said and what wasn't. Not for the police. Not yet. For me. If I was going to fight this, I needed more than emotion. I needed facts. Patterns. Receipts. It had to be methodical. I wouldn't yell. I'd build. The phone buzzed just as I was finishing the timeline. Janae again. One image. A screenshot of a group chat. Vincent's name bold at the top. I read the message twice to be sure. Don't worry. She'll break before she fights. I stared at those words. And that's when I knew I couldn't let them be right. I woke in the motel with Janae's message still echoing in my mind. In the half-light I sat up, looked around the small room, then pulled together my essentials, planner, recorder, laptop, nothing extra. I locked the door behind me, left quietly. Driving back toward Sacramento, every familiar street felt different. The gas stations, sidewalks, even the trees seemed to watch me, as if they remembered what had been taken. Every street feels like a witness now, I told myself. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, but I didn't speed. This wasn't a rush to escape, it was a return to reclaim. As I pulled into my driveway, Bologna and Lazaro stood by the sidewalk, workers milling behind them. One man carried ladders, another held clipboards. Lazaro greeted me first, we had maintenance scheduled. It'll just be a few repairs. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a contract with my signature, dated 2 months ago, assigning me responsibility for costly roof and foundation fixes. I looked at him, voice low, when did I sign this? He shrugged. You did, with your name. My chest tightened. Shock twisted into controlled rage. How dare he forge my name? I asked for the original, the timestamps, anything that proved this wasn't real. From behind, Bologna slid out a hospital bill, room charges, overnight stay, surgical fees, in my name 2 nights ago. I stared at the total. I never left the motel those nights. I never went to a hospital. I went in after the fight, Bologna said softly. They said you had a breakdown. I shook my head. I never had one. They were building a narrative around me, painting me as unstable, indebted, dramatic. They looked at each other, uneasy. I asked for witnesses. For records. For proof. They hemmed, stalled, gave vague answers. I pressed, calmly but firmly. I walked outside onto the porch, letting the sun strike my back while they squirmed behind me. I stood there, silent. I didn't beg. I didn't plead. I called ISA from my car and told her to meet me with legal copies and counsel. They underestimated me. At ISA's office later, I opened an envelope she quietly handed me. Inside, the same maintenance contract, and signed, with a note, pending review. No signature. No dates. Nothing to bind me. I looked up, eyes fixed. They forged my name. They planned my eviction in writing. I wasn't leaving. I was suing. I turned the key in the lock. It clicked, hollow, unfamiliar. The hall smelled like stale dust. I walked through rooms I once tended, the kitchen where I washed pans, the living room where I practiced piano late nights, the bathroom I never locked. Everything was shifted. The couch was moved 2 feet to the left, my favorite chair tilted slightly. My photos, pulled off the wall, frames askew. I felt a quiet sting in my chest. They walked through my life as if I were a guest now. Who moved my things? I called out, voice even. Bologna's laughter drifted from the dining room. I stepped inside. A tray of drinks was passed. Bologna said, let's have Mary, our helper girl, bring another round. The word hung in the air. Family laughter followed. Helper girl. A label. A judgment. I stayed silent, letting that echo settle in every corner of the room. Christmas past rose up, my mashed potatoes, my cookies, my silent labor thanked with nods, never names. Hurt twisted into ice. I stood straighter. I retreated toward my old bedroom. The heirloom sweater, my father's knitting, sewn with quiet care, was gone. Gone. I rifled through drawers, closets. Nothing but empty hangers and a torn note tucked into the dresser. The fabric, the warmth, the memory, erased. You can take a sweater. You can't take my memory, I whispered to the wood. I kept the piece of paper. It was the only part of that history they left behind. I sat in the hallway. Eyes closed. The word helper girl played on a loop. I counted names in my mind, who called me caring, who called me strange, who never said my name at all. I made a decision, I will not be background. I will be the narrative. I pulled out my notepad and scrawled, to whoever took my sweater, return it by 8 p.m. Or public notice. I rose and crossed the room, the weight behind each step growing. As I reached the foyer, Maribel's phone sat face up on the coffee table. The screen showed a thread between Maribel and Bologna. If she resists, we cut ties. We can't have her mess with the plan. My heart squeezed. So even my sister was in on this. The house was quieter than usual, like it knew what it had done. I walked through the hall toward the dining room where the old family albums used to sit stacked on the hutch. I'd kept them there for years, every birthday, every trip, every face that made this place feel real. But when I reached the shelf, they were gone. New albums stood in their place, fresh leather covers with gold letters. My stomach sank. I flipped one open. The same photos. The same holidays. But one thing missing, me. "Where's our old family album?" I asked. Maribel looked up from the table, then back down again. "We thought we'd update them," she said. Her tone was too even, too prepared. I turned another page. A blank space where my photo once was. No mistake. They didn't forget me. They deleted me. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My fingers hovered over the empty rectangle like it might still hold a pulse. I closed the book gently, the way you do when you bury something. I stepped into the hallway, trying to catch my breath, when Oliver appeared, 9 years old, holding his toy truck. He looked at me with wide eyes. "Aunt Elo," he said softly, "why isn't your face in the family picture?" The innocence in his voice cut deeper than any insult could. I smiled for him, thin and practiced. "The camera broke that day, sweetheart." He nodded, accepting it like only a child can. But I felt something inside me tear. They used his silence to carry their lie. I leaned against the wall until the air returned to my lungs. Bologna came out from the living room, wiping her hands on a towel. "Something wrong?" she asked, pretending concern. I looked straight at her. "You removed me from a memory we all lived." She tilted her head. "We just wanted the new family image clean." I laughed once, quiet, sharp. "Clean? You cleaned me out of existence." Maribel stood in the doorway behind her. I searched her face for even a flicker of shame. Nothing. Just that same dull calm she wore whenever she chose comfort over truth. I turned away from both of them. My feet carried me down the hall, not sure where to go until I stopped in front of Oliver's room. It used to be my favorite place in this house, the only room where the laughter felt real. I opened the door quietly. His walls were still covered in space posters. I walked to his little desk and started pulling drawers, not sure what I was even looking for. Then I found it. An old school photo, the kind they hand out in paper frames. Me standing behind him, my hand on his shoulder. Behind the picture, folded tight, was a torn note. I unfolded it slowly. For words, written in Bologna's hand, erase her from everything. My heart thudded once, heavy and cold. That was it, their quiet confession. I slipped the note into my pocket. Proof wasn't just paperwork now. It was handwriting. It was intention. I walked back toward the front door, the air thick with the smell of old carpet and betrayal. The porch light outside had started to flicker. I stepped out, the screen door creaking behind me. Pulled out my phone, typed the message to Bologna. "Erase me all you want. But you can't erase the truth. Prepare for what's next." I hit send. The wind caught the edge of my hair. I turned slightly, hearing something, a shift behind the curtain inside. The porch light flickered again, twice this time. And in that flicker, I saw a shadow move behind me. Evening fell like a bruise across the house. The air was heavy, as if it carried the memory of every lie spoken within these walls. I walked down the hallway, my hand brushing the faded wallpaper, until I reached the guest bathroom. The door was locked. Taped across it was a printed sign, bold letters, black ink, reserved for family use only. For a second, I thought it was a joke. Then I knocked. Once. Twice. Bologna? I called. Her voice floated out, distant but clear. It's for family, Eloan. You're not a guest. The words hung there, colder than the tile floor beneath my feet. I stared at the sign again, realizing it wasn't just about a bathroom, it was about belonging. About exclusion, made tangible. Maribel walked past carrying a basket of folded laundry. Can you open it? I asked. She froze mid-step, eyes fixed on the floor. I can't get involved, she whispered before vanishing down the hall. That was the moment something inside me broke, not in weakness, but in finality. I turned toward the living room, my pulse steady but fierce. Laughter echoed from the dining area, plates clinking, voices low and comfortable. I stopped at the doorway, taking in the scene, the family, my family, pretending peace was still possible. You locked me out of my own home's bathroom? My voice wasn't loud, but it sliced through their chatter. Bologna looked up, feigning confusion. We're being careful, Eloan. Hygiene, you know. I took a step closer. When did this home stop being mine? Her lips twitched into a half-smile. You chose to leave. We just adjusted. Around the table, faces stiffened, eyes darting anywhere but at me. Vincent wasn't there, but his authority lingered in the room like smoke. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Not rage, clarity. You can repaint walls, you can rewrite stories, but you don't get to decide who belongs. The silence that followed was almost satisfying. Bologna shifted in her chair, tapping her glass against the table. Let's not make this dramatic, she said. We're just moving forward. I walked past her, deeper into the room, and that's when I saw it, the family portrait. Hung right where it always was, above the mantel. Except this wasn't the one I knew. My breath caught. The background was the same, the frame unchanged, but the lineup had been altered. My face was gone. The space where I used to stand was filled with a patch of light beige wall, seamless, deliberate. For a long second, no one spoke. I stepped closer, tracing the air where my image had been. When did this happen? I asked, though I already knew. Bologna looked away. Maribel bit her lip. Someone muttered, it's just a new version. I lifted the portrait off the wall and turned to face them. You didn't just evict me, I said, voice low, even. You rewrote history. My words didn't tremble. I held up the frame, the glass catching the reflection of every face that had conspired to erase me. Who did this? I demanded. Who decided I was disposable? No one answered. A few stood up. Others shifted uneasily. The weight of shame was visible, but no one dared to claim it. I placed the portrait on the floor in front of them. You can lie to each other, I said quietly, but you can't lie to time. It remembers. Bologna finally stood, folding her arms. You're making a scene. I smiled slightly. No. I'm making a record. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the portrait, the sign on the bathroom door, and the faces that refused to meet mine. I turned and walked out toward the porch. The air outside was thick, humming with the last light of day. I set the portrait halfway across the threshold, half in, half out, where it belonged. Then I dialed ISA. It's time, I said. I want everything documented. Every forgery. Every lie. Make it public. Before she could answer, I heard it, a car door slamming behind me. I turned. Vincent stood by the driveway, arms crossed, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. His eyes locked on mine, unreadable. Then he said, slow and deliberate, "You're going to regret this move." And for the first time, I smiled without fear. The backyard glowed under strings of lights. I pulled into the drive and watched shadows shift behind hedges. Music drifted from the house, soft, celebratory. They were calling this a gathering. But I knew better. I parked and stepped onto the grass, keys still in my hand. They posed for photos. Laughter, glasses clinking. But no one made room for me. No candle. No happy birthday. My seat was empty, reserved for a ghost. I walked in, quiet, and joined their circle just enough to cast a shadow. I forced a smile. My recorder slipped into my pocket, ready. I didn't want to ruin the moment, but I needed to chronicle it. Bologna came forward with a wrapped box. A family heirloom, she announced, for someone to carry forward the legacy. Her eyes flicked to me. The name on the plaque belonged to someone else, my heirloom, given to another. The sweater, the frame, the legacy, they transferred it away. I swallowed. That was my birthright, I said. They scoffed. You never claimed it in time, someone said. The laughter echoed. Betrayal stung deeper than I expected. The air went still. I reached for my recorder and tapped play. Their voices filled the yard, talk of contracts, eviction plans, rewriting history. The laughter stopped mid-sentence. I read the note from Oliver's room, the one in Bologna's handwriting, "Erase her." Silence nodded between us. I held up the old portrait I'd rescued from earlier, glass cracked but frame intact, and threw it to them. You didn't just evict me. You tried to erase me. Every face shifted. Vincent's voice cut through the tension. You'll regret this move. He held up court papers, eviction proceedings reopened. I looked at him, calm. Bring it, I said. I motioned to ISA over the phone. I knew the rules. I held my ground. Lights flickered in the garden, flickered shadows. As I turned to walk away, a flashlight blinked from the hedge. Someone moved behind a tree. I wasn't done reclaiming. And whatever moves in shadows will pay. 2 weeks later, I stepped into the courthouse with ISA at my side. My heels clicked across the marble floor like punctuation marks. This was it, the end or the beginning. Vincent sat across the aisle, arms folded, smug. He thought it would be routine. Just another hearing. But ISA had everything lined up. She laid out forged documents, twisted clauses in the property records, and one key piece, Grandma's will. The one no one else knew I had. The one she'd handed to me in private when I was 16, just in case. The judge read the will aloud. You could have heard a pin drop when he said the house was legally mine. Vincent's jaw didn't drop. He didn't speak. He just stared, like someone trying to rewire reality. And in that silence, I felt something shift. The power I never had in that house, I held it now. Without raising my voice. Without raising a fist. Later that afternoon, I returned to the house one last time. Most of the furniture was gone. Echoes replaced the noise that used to fill every corner. I walked down the hallway slowly, touching the edges of the walls, not out of nostalgia, but out of finality. In the kitchen, I left a note. Just 5 words, I never needed your version. Folded it, stuck it under the fruit bowl, and closed the front door softly. No slam. No tears. Just quiet closure. The new apartment was nothing fancy, but it sat near a lake. Sunlight poured through the windows in the morning. I unpacked slow, taking my time, piece by piece. I found an old photo of me and Grandma. Just the two of us. That's the only one I framed. The rest stayed in the box. I started baking again. Something I'd always loved but hid. A little home business. Cookies, pies, banana bread. My first customer was a retired teacher. She smiled after her first bite and said, "This place feels like it's run by someone who's survived something." I smiled back. I have. And I'm still standing. One afternoon, a letter came. Bologna's handwriting. She said she was in therapy. She wrote, "I didn't know how to love without control." I read it twice. I didn't respond. Not yet. I folded it and tucked it into the back of my journal. Some conversations don't need to happen. Some doors are better left closed. I took a long walk by the lake that evening. Watched the sunset slip behind the water. No words. Just stillness. Then the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first. But when I answered, the voice was clear. "I'm back in town," Oliver said. "And I want to talk." I paused, staring at the lake. Just when I'd closed the door, the past knocked again.